Some moments in sports are so sudden, so visceral, so completely outside the boundaries of what anyone expected to see, that the human brain takes a full second to process what the eyes are actually watching. This was one of those moments. The eighth inning. Dodger Stadium packed to its limit, 56,000 people on their feet, the kind of electric late-game atmosphere that makes baseball in October feel like nothing else on earth. The score was close. The tension was real. And everything, was pointing toward a finish that would be decided by performance, by strategy, by the baseball that had been played for 8 innings of genuine competition. Then it happened. Not a pitch. Not a swing. Not a play that anyone will find in any rulebook or coaching manual or historical record of how this game is supposed to be played. 2 Braves players. 1 targeted. And Shohei Ohtani, the most recognized baseball player on the planet, the man whose presence alone changes the financial and cultural gravity of any stadium he enters, hit with a violence that turned 56,000 cheers into 56,000 gasps. The benches cleared in seconds. The bullpens emptied. And what unfolded on the field at Dodger Stadium in the 8th inning was not baseball anymore. It was a brawl. A genuine, chaotic, uncontrolled eruption of everything that had been building beneath the surface, and at the center of it, surrounded by bodies and noise and the kind of fury that organizations spend years trying to prevent, was Ohtani. By the time the umpires restored order, nothing about this game, or this series, would ever feel the same. Brawls in baseball do not come from nowhere. They are never truly spontaneous. They are the visible result of pressure that accumulated quietly, in pitches and glares and unspoken warnings, across multiple innings or multiple games before the moment of eruption finally arrives. The tension between the Dodgers and the Braves in this series had been building with the particular intensity that only genuine rivalry produces. These were not 2 teams going through the motions of a regular season series. These were 2 organizations that understood exactly what the other represented, a direct obstacle between them and the destination they had both invested everything to reach. And at the center of the Dodgers' identity, as he is at the center of everything connected to this franchise, was Ohtani. The Braves had spent the series trying to solve him. Their pitching staff had thrown every approach available, elevated fastballs designed to exploit his swing path, breaking balls targeting the outer edge, the kind of carefully sequenced attack that their analytics department had constructed specifically for this matchup. Some of it had worked. Some of it hadn't. But throughout all of it, there was a visible frustration building on the Atlanta side, the specific, simmering frustration of a pitching staff that does everything right and still cannot fully contain a player who operates at a level that makes doing everything right feel insufficient. That frustration had been leaking into the game in small ways. A pitch slightly too far inside. A look that lasted a beat too long. The kind of microaggressions that players notice and remember even when umpires miss them entirely. By the 8th inning, the account was full. The play that triggered it was not, by itself, extraordinary. What made it cross the line was the intent behind it, an intent that was visible enough to be unmistakable, that registered simultaneously with players on both benches the moment it happened. The first contact came from a Braves player in a collision that had no legitimate baseball justification. Not a play at the plate. Not a contested base. A targeted, deliberate physical engagement with Ohtani that existed outside the boundaries of competitive play. The kind of contact that every veteran player, every coach, every person who has spent time inside a professional clubhouse recognizes immediately for what it is. A message. But before that message could be processed, before the umpires could intervene, before the Dodgers bench could respond, a second Braves player made contact with Ohtani. This was the moment that ignited everything. Because one incident can be argued. One incident can be managed. One incident, however dirty, however intentional, can be absorbed within the structure that baseball provides for handling these situations. 2 incidents, in immediate sequence, targeting the same player, communicate something that the structure cannot absorb. They communicate that this was coordinated. That it was planned. That the decision to physically engage with Shohei Ohtani had been made before the 8th inning began. The Dodgers bench was on the field before the second contact had fully registered with the crowd. Veterans who have played this game for a decade moved with the automatic, instinctive speed of people who had been waiting, not for this specific moment, but for a moment they sensed was coming. The bullpen door opened. Players who had been watching from the outfield were suddenly running toward the infield with a purpose that had nothing to do with baseball. And in the middle of all of it, Ohtani, struck twice, by two different players, in a span of seconds, stood at the center of the storm. What unfolded across the next several minutes at Dodger Stadium was the kind of scene that the sport simultaneously condemns and cannot fully prevent, because brawls in baseball are ultimately the product of emotions that no rule can fully regulate. Players from both sides were involved. Pushing. Shouting. The physical language of men who have crossed the threshold from competition into something more primal. Umpires moved through the mass of bodies attempting to separate, to identify, to restore the order that 56,000 witnesses were watching collapse in real time. The crowd noise was unlike anything in the stadium that night, a full-volume combination of outrage and shock and the particular energy that emerges when something genuinely unexpected happens in a setting built for the expected. Fans who had come to watch baseball were watching something else entirely. But here is what matters most about what happened during those minutes of chaos, and what gets lost in the immediate drama of the imagery. Ohtani did not retaliate. In a situation that would have justified a physical response, that would have been understood and arguably defended by every person inside that stadium, Ohtani stood in the center of the brawl and did not escalate. He did not swing. He did not charge. He was the stillest person in the most chaotic moment, surrounded by teammates who were fighting on his behalf while he himself refused to add fuel to the fire he had been thrown into. This single detail says more about who Shohei Ohtani is than any home run or statistical milestone ever could. When the umpires finally restored order and the field cleared, the accounting began. Ejections came from both sides. The two Braves players directly involved in the contact with Ohtani were removed immediately, decisions that drew no argument from anyone with a clear view of what had occurred. Additional ejections followed as the umpiring crew worked through the footage of what had unfolded and made determinations about conduct that crossed the line even within the elevated standard that bench-clearing brawls create. The injury assessment for Ohtani became the immediate focus of everyone connected to the Dodgers organization. The medical staff was present before the field had fully cleared. The questions being asked, by teammates, by coaches, by the front office that had invested more in Ohtani than any organization had ever invested in a single player, were the questions that always follow a moment like this when the player at the center of it carries the weight that Ohtani carries. Is he hurt? How seriously? What does this mean for what comes next? The answers, as they emerged in the immediate aftermath, provided some relief but no complete comfort. Ohtani walked off the field under his own power. He was evaluated. The initial assessment suggested he had absorbed the contact without suffering the kind of structural injury that would remove him from the lineup going forward. But the physical question, while urgent, was never really the most important question. The most important question was about meaning, about what had just happened and why, and what it said about the state of a rivalry that had just produced something nobody could ignore. There is a version of this story that focuses entirely on the spectacle. The brawl footage. The ejections. The chaos of 56,000 people watching order collapse in real time. That version is incomplete. What happened in the 8th inning at Dodger Stadium was not just a brawl. It was a referendum on how the rest of baseball relates to Shohei Ohtani, on the specific pressure that his presence creates in every competitive environment he enters, and on the limits of what rivalry looks like when it encounters a player who exists at a level that makes normal competitive responses feel inadequate. The two Braves players who struck Ohtani made a decision, conscious or not, that revealed something real. When you cannot solve a player by conventional means, when the pitches don't work and the strategy doesn't work and the preparation doesn't produce the results the situation demands, there is a temptation to find another way to change the equation. What they found instead was the worst possible outcome. Not just ejections. Not just a brawl. But a moment that unified an entire stadium, an entire fan base, and, critically, an entire clubhouse behind the player they targeted. Teams that strike Ohtani do not demoralize him. They activate everyone around him. The Dodgers who charged onto that field were not acting out of obligation. They were acting out of something genuine, the specific fury that comes from watching someone you respect, someone who shows up every single day and sets a standard that elevates everyone around him, get targeted in a way that had nothing to do with baseball. That kind of unity cannot be manufactured. It cannot be coached. It emerges from culture, from the daily reality of sharing a clubhouse with someone whose commitment makes you want to be better, whose standard makes the team's standard rise, whose presence makes the idea of protecting him feel not like duty but like instinct. The 8th inning is over. The field is clear. The ejections are official and the league review is coming and the footage will be analyzed from every angle in every broadcast and every corner of the baseball internet for days. But here is what will last longer than the footage. Ohtani stood in the center of that chaos and did not flinch. Did not retaliate. Did not let the moment pull him below the standard he carries into every situation, no matter what that situation brings. 56,000 people watched two players try to rattle the most unrattleable man in baseball. They failed.